help you develop and grow your brand in a more authentic and sustainable way, locally and globally. Whether it's your personal brand or company brand, your product or service level brand. Learn from thought leaders from different parts of the world, from CEOs, business owners, managers, experts who tell their brand stories and share their valuable first-hand insights. My name is Brigitte Bojkowszky. I'm the founder and owner of Brigitte Brands, a branding strategy boutique offering online courses, workshops, one-on-one exclusive coaching. I help my clients and students craft meaningful strategies that effectively elevate their personal and organizational brands so they unleash their full potential and shine. So let's get started and dive with me into the world of brands. My guest today is Dr. Dee Holstine Vander Valk. She brings new and challenging concepts together in open and innovative conversations with clients, audiences, and readers with storytelling, humor, authenticity, data, strategies, and humility. She works with brilliant women that seek to lift themselves and other women up to achieve meaning and impact their lives by uncovering, recovering, discovering, and using the single most powerful tool at their disposal, their voices. Dee is a speaker, consultant, coach, writer, and mom to two teenage boys. She loves her work and her life, and she wants the same for everyone whose life she touches. I warmly welcome Dr. Dee Holstine Vander Valk. Welcome to BrandsTalk.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited having you as my guest, Dee, today. We only recently connected via the C-Suite network, and I think you gave a talk about authenticity.
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I really loved it because it brought so much attention and an intensive discussion around it. Yeah, so that was really a great introduction, and I thought I have to have this woman on my show.
Sounds good to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. So before we talk all things silent no more, could you tell us a little bit about your background, about your journey that brought you right there where you are now?
Well, since we've only got 40 minutes, I'll keep this on the shorter side. I grew up in a small agricultural town in southern Alberta, that's in Canada, and I was groomed to take over a family business, a family corporation from a very young age. Except for I had different ideas about where I wanted to live and what I wanted to do. And so off I went to university. I majored in theater. I became a theater director and a writer and a performer. So Shakespeare and all that good stuff. And from there, I realized the parallels between theater and being a director and leadership, and how the two of these things could inform each other and create a really rich space to have conversations and really grow leaders. So I took that. I ended up becoming a professor. I went off and did my PhD, and all the way through all of this, it's just about 30 years now. I've worked on helping people, and when I say people, in the past, my the people that I touched was a much broader category. I've narrowed that down for some reasons we might get into later. Um, but people figure out what's on the inside that they want to share on the outside, and how to do that in a way that makes people sit up and pay attention. So listen, engage, remember, want more, come back for more, all of that sort of thing. So that is the really brief answer. Oh, and I will add that now that I'm on the keynoting circuit, which I avoided for a long time and then just gave up and did, I found myself back talking to so many of the same audiences I grew up around. So I'm talking to supply chain and heavy industry and trades and all of that sort of thing, in addition to a much more diverse group. But because I grew up in this world, I speak the language of this world. And so I, much to my surprise, I have in some ways looped all the way back to my roots, and but with all the stuff I've brought with me since then. So
That's
there you go.
Ah, that's beautiful because it's usually all the experiences that we have in life. We somehow kind of loop back where we are coming from. It's usually the way of how it goes, right? And
Yep,
I
it
love
is.
also the combination of theater and leadership because you all
Mhm.
play a role. Yeah, as a person,
Absolutely.
play a role every day and
We're
every
doing it right
minute
now.
right now. Yeah,
We're doing it right now,
different
right?
roles we are in. So we come to that a little bit later when it comes to
Sure.
personal branding and the roles we play. So I would like to look back to when you started your company, when you started
Sure.
to become your own boss. How was that transition for you? How was it for you to really own it? To were there challenges on the way? What was easy? What was not so easy in this transition of becoming your own boss?
A couple of things. One, I learned really early on when I went into the world of working for other people that I didn't like working for other people. Like the entrepreneurial spirit was bred into me. I'm a fifth generation entrepreneur, right? So we're talking back into the late 1800s. This goes back. So I don't think I could have avoided it if I wanted. But so I learned really quickly to actually be really clear with the people that were my employers about my needs. So I look back and my gosh, I was bold because I would say things like, I'm not coming in on time and I might leave early, but you'll still get three times the work out of me that you'll get out of somebody else. So I got away with that shockingly, but towards my sort of mid to late 20s, I started to think about how I wanted my life to look if I wanted to have a family and things like that. And what I knew I wanted was to be able to have the flexibility of working hours that I determined, locations that I determined, that sort of thing. I wasn't thinking global or digital at that point in time. That's later on. Um, and so I ended up starting my first corporation at that point in time. And what the biggest challenge at that point in time was really twofold. One was that I was young, and so, even though I started in the world of teaching and coaching when I was 19 years old, by the time you're 29, you've got 10 years of experience. But people look at you and go, "Did you just start?" Like, and so getting people to believe that there was a body of work and expertise that was what they were buying. That was one piece of it, and the other piece was that I was still working full time. So I was actually working the equivalent of four jobs at the same time and finishing my master's degree and starting my PhD. Needless to say, at that time, I was very single because there was no time for anything else in my life at that point in time. So those were the initial challenges. Now my age and my appearance has caught up with my resume, so I have less of that, less of the explaining to do. But that was actually probably the biggest thing was being taken seriously both as a young person and as a female was so I've had ageism on the other side.
Mhm.
So I have appreciation for the challenges that come with that for sure.
Absolutely. Along with that, I looked up your website
Mm,
where I found a quote by Shuya Sengupta. It
ah,
instantly caught my eye.
yeah.
Too many women in too many countries speak the same language of silence. Your response to that, Dee, is silence no more. Let's learn a new language together, one that
Mhm.
has a powerful voice. So I would like you to elaborate on that a little bit. Um, what is your vision with that and the mission that comes along?
Whew, that's a small question, huh?
Yes.
So where I live now, which is a city called Calgary, it's a very, very international city. And so a lot of the people, probably 80% of the people I worked with when I was still sort of boots on the ground, brick and mortar here, were were immigrants. And so they were coming from, and I mean my family's immigrant family too, right? But it's just a matter of how many years and location. So what I discovered really early in that kind of work was that these women, it was mostly women that I was working with, and they were professionals, right? So they were doctors, lawyers, dentists, bankers, engineers, highly skilled,
Mhm.
highly intelligent women who had immigrated for a number of different reasons, but between being, in many cases, ESL, so English as a second language, and coming from a different culture into this space, there were things that were barriers, and sometimes they were huge barriers. There was the language barrier, but before the language barrier was the confidence barrier, the feeling like you belonged, that you could actually be yourself, and that you would be accepted as yourself in this frankly very new environment. And so that kind of got me thinking about things. I've had the stories and talked to people, and I love hearing people's stories. That's why you and I connected, because I'm like,
Yes.
you're not from down the block, this is fabulous, let's join, let's. So I from the word go, from the time I was little, that has been
Mhm.
seeing the world through other people's eyes is something I adore. So I got to hear all of these stories, but the interesting thing was the stories I was hearing from these women that came from elsewhere were the same stories that were being shared by, born in Canada or born in North America women behind closed doors. They weren't the things that were necessarily, so this was before social media even, really, but they weren't the things that were being talked about publicly. They were the stories, the imposter syndrome, the shame, the guilt, the blame, all those sorts of things. So I could see the one, from the coming to Canada perspective, and I could see the other, the growing up in Canada, and it was the same thing.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
were saying the same thing to each other quietly or to me privately, but they weren't saying it to the world, because they didn't feel like their voice had any value. They didn't feel like anybody would listen. They didn't think that they were good enough at speaking. Sometimes it was, I don't have the right words, or people will think I'm stupid, or I always get cut off, or I get told to be quiet because I'm a woman and I should just be glad to be at the table, never mind anything else.
Mhm.
And then when I moved into a global space and I started to build out from there, I started to talk to women all over the world, right? Literally, that were living all over the world. So whether that was Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Kenya or China or, all over the US, all over Europe, exactly the same conversations were happening again in this space. And so my answer to that was enough, enough. Somebody has to take the first step. Somebody has to basically throw themselves out there under the bus and take the risk that there's more to this and that we can change things. But we cannot change things alone. One person can't. But many people whose voices are being heard simultaneously in the various ways that they're sharing, that can be heard. It gets loud enough, you can't ignore it anymore.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the framework.
Yeah. So, what's your methodology? How do you teach that? So, in what ways do you offer your services, basically?
Okay, well, there's at least two answers to that question.
Mhm.
So, one answer is the mindset piece, because so much of what we have to face is the mindset of ourselves and how we perceive ourselves in the larger cultural spaces we find ourselves, right?
Mhm.
So many people that work on sort of empowering speaking and technical, like public speaking and all of that, they just jump right to this is how you present yourself on stage, this is how you gesture, this is what you wear, all of which is important, but that's a mask,
Yeah. Well.
right? It's what's inside, right? And so what we have to do is we have to figure out, what do you care about? What do you believe in? What matters to you? If you were to look, years out from now and you were to write your obituary, what do you want it to say? And where is the gap between right now and that? And how are you going to get there? Right? So we have to kind of do that deep work, and that is not something that people in general, women in specific, get the opportunity to do, right? That space and that time and that non-judgment. Your story is your story. I've got no right to judge who you are, the choices you've made, the path that you're taking. That's not what I do. I hold that space. I ask the questions. I point you towards resources. I'm there to support that journey. And given my background, I have all kinds of things at my disposal, whether that's, leadership theory or neuroscience or pedagogy, how people learn, how people process, confidence, all of that sort of stuff. So that's that piece. And then the other piece is the technical piece. Yes, you've done the mindset work and you're ready to do it, but I also bring that now this is how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're ready to do it, but now this is how you actually make this happen. Because too often you either are dealing with somebody who will just teach you the action or they'll teach you the mindset, but they won't teach you or guide you or walk with you the journey, the whole journey. And
Mm-hmm.
it is a journey. Anybody looking for a quick fix, I'm not the person because that's not how humans are. We're just not built like that. So whether that's, I'm going in and I'm doing a keynote, which I do a ton of, and I bring the stories and I bring the research and the theory and all these sorts of things because just that little bit of knowledge is powerful. Oh, I'm not alone. Oh, I'm not imagining things. This actually really is happening, and I'm not crazy. And that's one thing that a lot of women have, that sort of doubt in the I'm just making this up, I'm making this worse, I'm making this into something it isn't, all of those sorts of narratives we have going on. So, I bring the same model into consulting or facilitating or whatever, the knowledge, the stories, the baby steps. We'll just try a little of this. Now we'll try a little more of this. So the stretch, right? So moving towards a stretch, what's the stretch for you? Okay. What's the next stretch for you? So it just depends on the nature of the relationship that we're having, whether it's one-on-one or a large group, but I still follow the same trajectory all of the time, from the mindset work through to, okay, that's lovely, now what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the methodology, if you will. It's kind
Yeah.
of a couple mashed together.
Yeah, so this now what you have mentioned right now, because I
Hmm.
would like to elaborate on that a little bit.
Hmm.
You gave
Sure.
talks. There was the one on imposter syndrome and other
Yeah.
lies we tell ourselves. And
Hmm.
there was this other talk, the psychologically safe disruptive thinking. Is this
Yeah.
about the what?
Um, is this about well, I use the model of what, so what, now what through everything I do,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And so with the psychologically safe disruptive thinking, we're taking again two big different ideas and bringing them together. And that's what I do. I take different ideas and I bring them together and I say, okay, now what do we see when we do this? It's like picking up a crystal and turning it around and realizing that every twist shows you something different. And neither, they're not better or worse, they're just different. And that's the value in it. So looking at the psychologically safe workplace or space, what is that? What does it look like? And it's attached to authenticity and inclusion and belongingness and all of these ideas, right? But looking at this idea of disruptive thinking, and I want to put a caveat in here, just put a pin in this right now, that when I'm talking about disruptive thinking, I am not talking about the type of disruptive thinking that goes into management theory where we're looking at a completely disruptive idea. So I'm not using the language like that. What I'm talking about when I use that language is the idea that you can step into that space and say, this is what everybody else sees, but this is what I see. And a dialogue can come out of that, and it's safe to do that. And that's actually the benefit of having diverse people in the room, is that you get much more, going back to the analogy of the crystal, you have much more that people see. And if it is a safe place for them to say, okay, hold on, has anybody thought about what's going to happen if we do this? Or, hey, there's this whole segment of the marketplace that's not having their needs met, why don't we explore going in that direction? Or anything and everything, right? Like if we were to develop our own software in-house instead of having to outsource it, there's a million ways this conversation could go. But having those sorts of outside the box thoughts in a place where it's safe to have them, to me, is the key to the future. It
Absolutely.
is without doubt. And that's what leaders need to cultivate in themselves. and it's what they need to create the space and place for in their teams and their organizations. That is going to be where the difference is. That is going to be where people not only survive but thrive
Yeah,
going forward.
it's where the growth is. Yeah, getting
Absolutely.
inspired from all these different perspectives that are coming in. You alone can
Right.
only go that far, but that
That's right.
brings you to another whole new level. With other
Mhm.
people in a safe room where you
That's
freely
right.
and safely can exchange ideas, also fears and hopes and what has
Mhm.
not worked, but out of that you can come up with really creative ideas going forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just a little trick that everybody can use if they're listening. There's an activity in theater and improvisation called yes and, which you may or may not have heard of. But what we do often when we hear an idea that's outside of kind of our realm, we'll say yes, but, right? And the minute you say but, you've negated everything. You've cut off the energy, you've cut
Exactly.
off the conversation. But what if you take and you go, yes, and you take their idea, whatever it is, and you build on it,
Mhm.
right? Yes, and we could do this. Yes, and we could look at this. And yes, and we could talk to this part of the team. Yes, and we could hire somebody for this, whatever it is. It creates an energy, a synergy, a possibility, a forward movement
Mhm.
that it's like it's one of the first activities you do in improvisation in theater, but it's incredibly powerful in a space where you want to create that safety and that innovation simultaneously.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's your tip, everybody that's listening. Write it down. Try it out at your next meeting.
Yes, and so inspiring.
Yes, and
Absolutely. Great. Um, Dee, you figured out very early in your life that, first of all, you loved words. Second, words had power.
mhm,
Third, girls using words powerfully weren't rewarded.
okay,
Fourth, you had a choice.
yeah,
And you could be the option A to stay silent and being liked. And there's the other option being heard and maybe being unpopular, right? So
yeah.
you chose option B
Option
because
B.
you're courageous. So, what advice can you give to young girls to be as
Mm.
courageous as you were to choose option B?
Number one, um, accept the fact that not everybody's going to like you, and that's okay. That that's fine. In fact, if everybody does like you, you're probably not being you. That's probably what's happening. And so it's a cost benefit sort of thing. It may feel good in the short term to be feeling like you're included by pretending you're somebody that you're not, by being quiet, by saying the same sorts of things, being compliant, whatever those sorts of things are. But I am here to promise you that you will pay a price.
Hmm.
You will pay a very high price for that. I now deal with women that are around my age who have chosen that A path and are now at the middle of their life. And COVID didn't help because everybody got time to sit with themselves and think about things in a lot of cases. They're realizing that the life they're living is not the life that they want to live, nor is it a reflection of who they believe they are. And so, how do you get out from underneath a mountain, right, where you've created a whole life, lifestyle, world, identity, expectations from other people, and it's not where you want to be? How do you get out from under that? And that's part of the work that we do, but you can save yourself a lot of that. And I'm seeing this happening younger and younger, so the women I'm working with are younger and younger and younger in many ways, by doing the work to figure out a who you are independent of family, faith, culture, and community, right, the expectations that are put on you, and who you are, and that not everybody's going to like that, and that's okay, because you get one life.
Yeah.
You get one life. And the other people that are judging you and telling you what to do, they get one life. But they don't get your life too. They get their life. And that's a hard thing to do with, like I said, family, faith, culture, and community. I know I have been there. I have been the person who went against the grain. And when I went to university, my dad wouldn't talk to me for 2 months because I went to university. I went went to university. That's not a bad thing. But yet, that's what happened. So that would be the advice. The number one thing I would say.
Thank you so much. I had
Mhm.
similar experiences when I, yeah, communicated as a flight attendant. I want to stop flying and start studying as a student. So yeah, I can relate to that. Very, very
Mhm.
good. So, yeah, so your answer ties very well into my next question. You are
Oh,
an
hey.
innovative research and expertise based teacher, speaker, facilitator, consultant, coach, and writer. So
Yeah.
you are a woman thought leader, definitely. Yeah. And you are an authentic personal brand with a powerful voice. So, Dee, my question to you now, what does it mean to be a personal brand?
Uh, I've thought a lot about this question, actually. And to me, it seems like a really simplistic answer, but I walk the talk,
Yeah.
right? That's that's what it comes down to for me. It's not stuff I say or put on my website or put into social media because I'm trying to get people to like me, or because I'm trying to close a sale. I'm trying to convert somebody to something. What you see is what you get,
Mhm.
and so there's nothing hidden. This is exactly who I am. This is exactly what I offer. This is exactly why I offer it. And so anybody that works with me or for me, um, that's something, frankly, I screen against, right? Because there's an alignment piece as well. We should be able to be authentic together. And yes, I'll help you with that journey. Absolutely. And I'm honored to do it. But there's a level of commitment to the authenticity, a commitment to being present, frankly, a commitment to learning and going, oh, well, that did not go the way I imagined or planned. Okay, new plan.
Mhm.
So always, so for me, being a personal brand means being the person, myself, that I present to the world and that I present through my relationships and through the products that I offer and services I offer.
Mhm.
So
Because, yeah, and that circles back to what you have said before. You will not be liked by everyone. So
nope.
you're going to be in alignment exactly with those people that like
That's
you.
right.
That's not
That's right.
to be everyone, right?
That's
Okay.
right.
Any tips or helpful advice of how we can powerfully strengthen our personal brand?
Well, of course, speaking from the perspective and lens that I used in my work,
Mhm.
it is doing that sort of deep work. What are your values? What is your purpose? What is it that you want your life and subsequently your brand to do? What's the legacy? And that's a word I use a lot in my work. What is the legacy? What do you want to leave behind when you and or your company are no longer here? Right? And so digging into that, figuring out what those answers are, and not just having it on a page on your website, which admittedly I do have a section that says, my values are curiosity, number one, hands down, no question. But not just the lip service, but internalizing that, accepting it, and then everything you create and everything that you do starts from that spot and moves forward. Listening to your intuition, if it doesn't feel aligned, is not aligned. It will never be aligned. You might be able to squish it into the box and send it out in the mail right now, but promise you, I promise you, there's gonna come a reckoning day when you have to face that, you pushed something that wasn't authentic, it wasn't aligned, and now you've got cleanup on aisle 7 kind of thing. So that would be what I would say.
Comes back like a boomerang, right?
Oh, it
If
sure does. It sure does.
yes.
And I'm sure we've both got stories about that.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that would be, always doing the brave thing,
Hmm.
right? Because people are watching.
Yeah.
Young women are watching. The women around you are watching what you do. They're listening. And you will become a leader, whether you choose to be or not, by the actions and, frankly, reactions that you have in these spaces and interactions.
Mm. Talking about actions and reactions, are you willing to share any experience that was a major learning for you, a setback that was important for you growing from it going forward, and in hindsight offered a huge opportunity? So, an action that you set, or an inaction, which also is an action, basically.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
So, is there anything, a detour that was significant in the way that it shaped you and continues to shape you, perhaps?
Oh, happy to share. Love to share.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's out there in the open. I had there's lots of answers I could give, but the one that pops to mind right now
Yeah.
is um so I've had three corporations. So before children, after children, and then when I moved into a digital global space, I had to reinvent things for a different marketplace. So in between the first and the second, no, actually the second and the third, I was again working by contract. So I was kind of an employee, kind of not. That's how contracts work. With a place that I had long had a relationship with and knew the people. It's a very sort of it's a small community globally that do the kinds of things that I do in the way that I do them. So I was in this space, and I wanted desperately to be included. I wanted to be
Oh.
part of
Mm-hmm.
this space. But as it happened, everybody that was already in this space was had been there forever. Like I'm talking about since they were kids, forever, like forever. And they were all 10 to 15 years older than me. This was not only sort of a career, but it was a lifestyle, a vocation, a calling, right? But as it is for me as well. But they were very insular. And so, even though they knew me, they knew my work, there was no question there. I had originated in another community. I had joined their community. So, like literally different cities kind of community. I had joined, but there was always stonewalling. There was always these walls. And I would put ideas forward, and all of a sudden they'd show up on somebody else's roster, right? It'd be their course, it would be their innovation, and at first I was gracious about it, like, okay, well, maybe there's a reason, or maybe they had the same idea, but pretty soon it was pretty obvious there was something going on there. And even though I was included and they got value out of my inclusion, I didn't get meeting invitations. I didn't get social invitations. I didn't get opportunities to develop new products or courses. Um, and it was very clear that that wasn't going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Both because I didn't share the history, but at the same time, I didn't share the oh, this will sound terrible, the worshipfulness I should have for the model and the leadership structure, right? I just looked at the world differently. And so it came down to the conversation. It was a very honest conversation where um they were saying, what would you like to do and where would you like to, all of those sorts of things. And I'd had this conversation before. So I said, well, you know what, I'm going to be honest with you. There's really no point in us having this conversation. Why is that? Well, because we've had it before. And the reality is, I'm 10, 15 years younger than everybody else here. And it's not until people die that I'm going to get a shot at
Mm.
any of this. And that, by my math, is like when I'm 80 or 85. And I'm really not willing to
Wait,
stick
that's up.
around for that long. They were shocked and horrified and all of the things you might imagine. Um, Sometimes the truth has that effect. And I said, so, it's all the same to you. I'm going to go my own way because, frankly, I'm already doing it all on my own anyways. Might as well make it official. And the part I left out was, and not line your pockets in the process. So that was the moment where I realized that it doesn't matter how good you are at your job and how well you play in the sandbox. Sometimes the smartest choice is to leave.
Mhm.
And you can leave with an open heart, and you can leave with a, well, learn some stuff from that and move forward. And it doesn't have to be, it's not because I wasn't good enough, it wasn't because I didn't offer value or that I didn't try. It just wasn't the right place.
Mm.
And so it took me a while to get to that, but I got there. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that because when I relayed that to people in my circle afterwards, there was a sort of, you said that? You actually said it? And I said, well, yeah, I wasn't rude about it, but I did say it
Mhm.
because I had to.
Mm. Yeah, a very bold move that you did. And
Yep, it could
something,
have gone a lot of ways.
yeah, I mean, you opened up room to do something new and let something go that was not supportive anymore, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I have one more branding question to you.
Okay.
I love your company name. You call
Ah,
your company Tea with D. And I would like to know whether there is a brand naming story behind.
there is a brand naming story behind
Yes,
it.
tell us.
So, so first of all, just to be clear, it's TEE, not TEA, although I did have to purchase all the domains so that if people were spelling it wrong, it would get routed to me. Actually, the original company name was called the Eloquence Equation. So I was looking at the personal, the professional, and the performative, which is what I've outlined in our conversation today. But in Canada, fairly recently, they went through a whole trademark sort of consolidation process. So we went from having like 250 different types of spots you could be in for trademarking
Mhm.
to like 46. And so in that process, everything that had to do with coaching, writing, performing, anything like that got lumped into one box. Okay. So I had all the I had all, rookie mistake, everyone. Take notes. I had gone ahead with the branding. I'd gone ahead with all of the logo creation, all of that sort of thing, um, under the assumption, and you know what they say about assumptions, but under the assumption that all would be well. So imagine my shock when they came back to me and said, "Sorry, you can't have it." And the reason was there was a woman she's not a corporation, she's just a sole proprietor in Quebec, which is one of our provinces. She runs a company called just Eloquence, and she helps people with their writing projects, which of course has nothing at all to do with what I do. And so even though so she had eloquence in her name and I had eloquence in my name, and because of this collapsing structure, they lumped all of what we did into one category. So there was no way to say, well, this has nothing to do with that.
Mm.
So they said to me, you can't have it. So I'm already thousands of dollars into the development of this situation. And so crying was was what I wanted to do, but I didn't. I remember I got off with a lawyer, and I sat right where I am right now with my teacup, going, "Okay, what do I do now?" Right? And after about an hour of basically just sitting and staring at nothing, I took the letters from the eloquence equation and I collapsed them, and I said, "Okay, T," and then my name, D, T with D.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm a like huge tea aficionado, and there's so much I can do with the rhyming, the catchiness, the concept of tea gardens, tea tables, tea houses. Like there's just so much room to play, and because I'm a word person, I love doing that. So I called up the lawyer and called up everybody, the designer and stuff, and said, what would it take to make this happen? Luckily, the designers were very gracious about it and said, really, we're just changing like everything's been decided, the palettes, all of that. So we can just change out the script, right? We can just change what it says. So it was a very small project. Of course, the legal fees are the legal fees, and there's no mercy there. So I had to go through that process again and get copyrighted. But yeah, that's how it ended up happening. And once I went to the TEE, I realized there was room for me to move in terms of what those letters now stood for.
Yeah,
And so after a whole process, I ended up with transformation and empowerment through expression.
yeah, I like that because your first option that you actually wanted did not work out and you were so desperate brought you to something much better. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I consider that to be the universe looking out for me that day,
That,
for sure.
yeah,
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 for
it
sure.
did, definitely.
It,
Okay, Dee, we are at the end of our
look
show.
at us.
But before, I would like to do a quick word rap with you.
Okay.
Can
So
you
this
give
is
me?
new to me. I know you mentioned this, but I'm like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
So
So
let's do it.
I want to have quick and short answers
I'll
on
try my best.
specific terms.
Okay.
All right. Silence,
Space to listen.
voice,
Connection to world.
women.
51% of the planet.
Yeah. Disruptive thinking,
Thinking that doesn't rely on accepted norms and conventions.
beautiful. And last but not least, brains.
Ways of conveying your beliefs and value offer to the world.
Thank you so much. Great.
Did I
Dee,
pass? Did I pass the
yes,
word
you
map?
passed the test.
Fantastic.
A,
Awesome.
A
Thank you.
plus.
Yay.
So, Dee, where can listeners find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Ah, yes. Okay. So as I was mentioning earlier, it's TEE. All right. So it's the standard www.tee with D. Just the letter D. Don't put DEE. That throws people. .com. So TEEWITHD.com. T with D.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. Very active there. And I might revive my Instagram later this year, but don't go looking for me there because Instagram and I had a breakup. And I do have a presence on Facebook, but I don't spend as much time as I ought to. So LinkedIn and my website will give you everything you need, including a way to contact me if that's what you want.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah,
You're
Dee,
welcome.
thank you for being my guest today on BrandsTalk.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And I think also the pleasure of all of our listeners to learn about no more being silent and about how we can uncover, recover, discover, and use the single most powerful tool at our disposal, our voice. Thank you, Dee. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Take care.
Thank you all for joining BrandsTalk today, and please give it your social love and leave your comments below. Did you know you can also listen to this show as a podcast on your go? Just follow BrandsTalk on your favorite platform. And if you're interested in learning more about my services, head over to my website, brigittebrands.com. I hope you will join me again when we dive into the world of brands, live or by having me in your earbuds walking the talk. Bye for now. Let's shine. You deserve it.